It's not about trying to fix somebody, because ultimately we're not broken. And I often say that depression or anxiety isn't who I am. It's just something that I experience.
Welcome to the Side Hustle Lounge. If you're looking for flexible ways to earn income, grow your mindset, and live the lifestyle you've always dreamed of, you're in the right place. So lower the lights, grab your favorite beverage, and join your host, founder of NotaryCoach.com and Amazon best-selling author of Sign and Thrive, How to Make Six Figures as a Mobile Notary and Loan Signing Agent, Bill Soroka.
Hello and welcome to the lounge. Today we're going to be talking about a startling statistic that 72% of entrepreneurs are directly or indirectly affected by mental health issues, compared to just 48% of non-entrepreneurs. I have some firsthand experience with this, battling depression, anxiety, almost my entire life. And it's my honor to bring my friend, mentor, coach, and a men's mental health wellness counselor, Dustin Hogan, to the show to talk about that today. Dustin, welcome.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me here. Really looking forward to this conversation and getting to hang out with you.
Yeah, I love that we kind of get to do this weekly on our one-on-one sessions, but to be able to bring this and talk about something that's so important, not only to entrepreneurs, but to just people living their life in general, is important to me. And I know it is to you too. So really appreciate you being here. Before we go too deep into this, though, before people just click off, they're like, oh gosh, we're talking about mental health. Can you tell us what you mean by mental health?
Definitely. I mean, for me, mental health is about just this state of being where we're able to cope with our everyday stresses in our life, that we can work productively, and more importantly, that we're feeling, at our best. And our best is in quotes because that's different for everybody else. And similar to our physical health, our mental health and our mental wellness is constantly in flux depending on the time of the day, what we're faced with, what we're going through in our lives. So it's something that we're constantly working towards. Oftentimes when people talk about mental health, they relate it to like mental illness or mental health disorders. But mental health is really about this state of being that we're able to cope with everyday stresses in our lives. And obviously we're in a time right now where stress is at probably the maximum that it's been in a very, very long time. So that's why today is such an important conversation.
Yeah, I think it is. And I love that definition. And I love that it carves out some room for this to be very personal. I think part of the challenge, maybe on any creative endeavor or anything that you're putting out in the world, people, you think you're living up to somebody else's definition of success or whatever it is, or how you're supposed to be acting or how it's supposed to feel when you get to a certain place. And that definition that you gave allows us to define that and really focus on the feeling. Mm-hmm. The feeling of success might happen before or after society thinks it should. You are uniquely qualified to talk about this because you've been through some side hustles a little bit too. And I wondered if we could kind of lay the foundation, maybe share a little bit about your side hustle journey and then how that led into getting into mental wellness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I look back on the journey over the last, 10 or 15 years from like a career standpoint and an entrepreneurship standpoint, it seems like it's constantly been filled with side hustles that have like turned into the main hustle. And I don't know if that's just, I can't stay focused in on one thing. I mean, the blessing and the curse of an entrepreneur is like, what's next? What's next? They're always looking at the next thing. And I know you can resonate with that totally.
There's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah, man. So for me, that's kind of been the journey that I've been on. I mean, I went to school back in the day for hotel restaurant management and had these big visions of either wanting to run a hotel or to start up a restaurant. And while I was, going to school and then eventually started working for the Marriott, on the side, I was doing some landscaping. I was cutting grass in the neighborhood and quickly realized that I was making 3 to 4 times the amount of money cutting grass on the weekends than I was at the hotel. So after a couple of years of working in the hotel industry, I decided to take that side hustle and make it the full-time thing, and built up a fairly successful landscaping company in my early 20s. And then, as I was doing the landscaping thing, I needed to find another side hustle. So I got into DJing because I was passionate about DJing. And then eventually I stepped away from the landscaping business, and DJing became the main thing. And that's been a side hustle that I've been, has kind of remained on the side or at the forefront for the last 15 or so years. And then, music and DJing was kind of the thing. And I started to kind of get into this coaching and speaking thing. So I was doing, free coaching sessions and speaking at events for free. And then once again, soon realized that side hustle could turn into the main thing. And so for the last 5 years, that's what I've been doing, is really just focusing all of my efforts into coaching. And then in the last 2 years, I've branched into the counseling side of things. And now I marry the two together. Like, I bring a very coachy energy to my counseling and therapy sessions. And then to my counseling sessions, to my coaching sessions, I bring some counselor and therapy vibes to it as well. So yeah, it's been this constant pursuit of more so my passions, but the side hustles that I was passionate about, and then making those the main pursuit.
Yeah, well, I think that really helps bring energy and wisdom to your sessions and your clients, for sure, because you have this, you know what entrepreneurs are going through, you know what they're going through in their mind. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, because things did not go according to plan all the time. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it led into this new passion for the mental wellness?
Sure. Yeah, so for me, anxiety and depression have been something that I've dealt with for most of my life. And for most of my life, it was a part of me that I hid away. It was kind of like this internal battle, this internal struggle, this internal torture at times. Because really, I know that's a big word to use, but that's what it felt like at times. So for me, early on, anxiety kind of showed its face, fearful of just so many different situations, generalized anxiety, social anxiety at times. We moved a lot growing up. So going into, new schools and new environments certainly was stressful on my young mind. So that kind of carried throughout, as a child into my teens, and then even as an adult. And then in the last, it almost seems like the last 10 or so years, that depression has really shown its ugly head. And, there's so many debates out there of was it a nature thing? Was it an environmental thing? And the research shows like it's still undecided if it's changes in our brain structure that lead to these things, or changes in our environment. So in my mind, it's kind of a combination of both. So yeah, depression really started to show its ugly head over the last 10 years. And then unfortunately, it was exacerbated as I pursued these like intense entrepreneurial journeys. Specifically, when things did not work out according to plan. And as we know, down this path of an entrepreneur, either if you're a solopreneur doing things for yourself, if you've got an entire team, you can come up with the greatest plan in the world. But oftentimes when shit hits the fan, that plan goes out the window. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, and certainly in my case, our mental health can go out the window. And for me, 2018 is when things really just hit absolute rock bottom. I'd launched a series of workshops and events that had some initial success, but I wasn't able to get it off the ground. Income wasn't coming in. Income was going out at the other end. Didn't know the path that I was going to be heading down. One failure after another, and then eventually my mental health just hit absolute rock bottom. And in 2018, 2019, dealing with a lot of like suicidal ideation, a lot of worthlessness, helplessness, hopelessness. Yet on the outside, I was still showing up as a confident, charismatic, guy that seemed like he had it all together. And in so many parts of my life, I did have it together, but mentally, dude, like I was struggling. And it took hitting rock bottom to make me sit down and realize if I didn't take my mental health super seriously, I didn't know the path that I'd be heading down. And that scared the shit out of me, man. That scared the living shit out of me. And through that darkness, I came to the realization of like, okay, I've got to like heal myself, but I want to use this pain, this emotional and psychological pain that I'd been dealing with to then help others. So it was at that kind of the lowest point in my life, I made the decision that, I wanted to actually go back to school to really develop the counseling and the therapy skills to then be able to go out into the world to help others, to heal myself, and to really make an impact. So fast forward to today, that's what I'm blessed to be able to do. And it's been, an intense journey to get to this point.
Yeah, I love that story of energy conversion, and I can relate. But that rock bottomness, do you find that to be a necessity for change, or do you think there's an easier way to do it?
Oh man, that's a great question. That's a great coaching question, actually. Like many things, and we've even talked about this before, I don't think it's as black or white as like, is it a necessity or is it not? Because there's certainly people that haven't hit rock bottom that have found their purpose, that have found their meaning, that are doing what they want, without having to go down that. On the other side, there's so many stories out there of people hitting absolute rock bottom, like 50 cents in their bank account. And that's the moment that they've kind of like had to move forward, or there's a major loss or trauma in their life. And it's from that moment forward that they found their purpose. So I think it's a spectrum, there's that gray area in there. And just recognizing that it's whatever path is personal to you, that's the right experience to go through. And it's just ultimately comes down to whatever we make of whatever is put in front of us. For me, this is what's been put in front of me. And, even in those dark moments where filled with tears and filled with just like absolute overwhelm and uncertainty, just that tiny little voice in the back of my mind that says, dude, like this, what you're going through right now is going to help other people. So just stick it through, just stick with it.
Powerful lesson. When you're at rock bottom, how do you recognize that voice? Like how do you know when it's time to stop or when it's time to bounce up?
And I can only speak for myself, but that voice is usually a whisper. And the voice that's saying all of the negative things that the mind likes to sometimes be in this vicious cycle is screaming at the top of its lungs. And just like in real life, oftentimes the people that are like screaming in your face are the ones that are filled with most fear. And it's those that sometimes have that quieter voice that actually have the most wisdom. So that's been the case for me. It's that quieter, almost non-existent, just little hum of a voice in the back of my mind that holds the true power. It's that screaming, yelling voice that's telling me I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, I'm a failure. It's just screaming because it has no actual power, and it needs to try and find power in a certain way.
It's overcompensating. Yeah,
exactly.
That inner critic can be a real bitch sometimes.
Yeah,
for sure. Now, why is it, do you think, entrepreneurs in particular are more susceptible, or why more risk for entrepreneurs?
Certainly. I think there's so many reasons for that. But first and foremost, everything falls on our shoulders, right? Mm-hmm. We are having to make every single decision. When 5 o'clock comes around, the job doesn't end. We're often thinking about it 24 hours a day. It's a very lonely path. Part of the draw to entrepreneurship and, side hustle and being a solopreneur is like being able to chart your own path and do things on your own. And at the same time, especially initially, it's like there are hours, and I'm sure you will resonate with this, where you're sitting at a desk for 10, 12 hours a day, doing your work, building your business, not talking to a soul.
Yeah.
And while there are benefits to that, there are also, downsides to it as well. So loneliness is a huge, huge part of it, contributing to the downward spiral of many entrepreneurs' mental health. The stress that comes with it is a huge component of it.
Well, let's talk about that loneliness factor for just a little bit, because I think that that really resonates with me. Number one, because I think a lot of us like to blaze trails. We like to be the pioneer in something. We like to take an idea and run with it. And when we do that, we kind of buck the system. And then when things don't work out, you carry that additional burden as well. Mm-hmm. It's like you get those "I told you so's" that happen in there. How do you counter loneliness?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for me personally, it's, especially in this time of disconnection right now, it's been even more challenging. But just finding any way to connect is a step in the right direction. And oftentimes, I think going back to this concept of black or white thinking that we talked about earlier, it's like, hey, I'm either like super social and like getting together with all of my friends, or I'm doing nothing and I'm being a hermit and staring at the wall and just, reading books and working on my business. But there's this middle ground right now, right? We're on the other side of the continent, yet we're still connecting with each other. Right. Same with my parents, like getting them comfortable with jumping on FaceTime and Zoom has been a beautiful way to get connected with them. Even just something as simple as getting outside and going for a walk, I found just being in the presence of other people, not even having to interact with them, is a way to kind of combat that loneliness. Like I think of the times that I've worked out of like co-working spaces, for example. And, I'm there doing my own thing, but I'm surrounded by other people who are in a similar energy. So maybe we're not talking and interacting for the entire day, but just being in those spaces and the energy of other people can often combat that loneliness. So, it's not just about jumping in and having to be like super social. It's about these little doses of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I enjoy that too, because I think we don't recognize, especially if we're in an environment where maybe our friends or our family are not entrepreneurs, if we don't have a vent or some people who get us, and we realize that we're not absolutely crazy sometimes, and there's other people out there kind of blazing their own trails, that helps combat that loneliness a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd love to even ask you, like, what are some of the things that you reach for to combat that loneliness or to build some of that connection back into your life?
Yeah, I've had to work really hard at this, and I'm not really good at it because of, I've got my personality type. I've got my own habits, but I really have to prioritize and schedule connection time. I have to literally put it on my calendar, reach out to a friend, reach out to a partner, reach out to mom, whatever it is. Because I can get almost obsessed in what I'm doing because I love what I do. I love my work. I love this energy that I have going on. So actively scheduling it. And then I would say, I've been joining masterminds, trying to find my own path in that. It doesn't always work out like I expected it to, but I think that kind of intentional effort is what I have to do to keep going.
Yeah. And I think there's so much value in just what you said there, and like such a golden nugget of to take away of like scheduling it in, right? We're scheduling in our work meetings, we're scheduling in our Zoom calls, we're scheduling in, webinars. Why would we not schedule in our downtime or our connection time? Because it's just as important, if not more important, for the success of our business to have these times of connection built in. Like I look at my calendar and I like scheduling date night with my wife, because if I don't do it, it's going to get filled with something else.
Right. Exactly. And you just reminded me of what triggered this is, a lot of us are working hard to build a dream life, a lifestyle. It might be money. It might be freedom, independence, lifestyle, travel, whatever it is, but it usually involves other people. And I think one of the traps of entrepreneurship is that we get in and we work so hard that we burn bridges. People feel left out. We do damage to relationships. And then we think we finally make it, but there's nobody up there left to enjoy it with us because we've left them behind. So I had that realization. I realized I had to schedule it. If I had one piece of advice, though, I would tell you not to tell the people that you're scheduling that you schedule it.
Yeah, good
For
point.
some reason, I let that slip a couple times, and people got so offended that I put them on my calendar.
Yeah,
but I had.
Yeah, or even just thinking like, date night with my wife. Okay, babe, it's like you've hit your 2-hour window. Like I've got another appointment.
Our time is up. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, so we got 5 minutes left. So just start like wrapping up.
Yeah, ran into that a couple times too. But I think if you set the expectations in the beginning and it's like, hey, I've got a couple hours. You want to go and grab a bite to eat, but I have to be back by 1 for a call. Totally. I've learned that I can totally do that. And I feel like I kind of cut you off on your list of why entrepreneurs are so impacted by this, but let's keep going because I'm so curious.
Yeah, no worries, man. I'm just enveloped in the conversation here. So there's a couple others that I think are really important. So first and foremost is this idea of like impression management. So as an entrepreneur, we're so concerned with the impression that we're putting out in the world, especially for those that are maybe going down the path of like trying to find funding or bring on investors, right? Or, entrepreneurs that are very front facing with clients. It's like trying to put out this impression of like, we've got it all together, that like, we've got this like suit of armor on, nothing gets past us, nothing affects us. When the reality often is, and I just think about myself, like, dude, I would have, when I was on the road speaking, sometimes speaking upwards of like, 1,000, 1,500 students every single day, I'd wake up in the morning, like filled with tears, just overwhelmed with anxiety and depression to the point where it felt like sadness was like seeping out of my pores. And I'd have to show up at these events. Obviously, I couldn't be on stage like that in front of like 500 kids. And like, yes, I could generate that energy. But then as soon as I'd get back into the car to drive to the next one, I'd be breaking down again. So I think about from an entrepreneurial standpoint of like having to just like manage this impression that you're putting out into the world, which is so overwhelming in and of itself.
Is this the imposter syndrome? Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's not the imposter syndrome. It's more along the lines, like when I'm talking about it from my standpoint, from like a mental health standpoint, right? So like clearly I was in like a very distressful state, but had to put on that mask because I had to give off the impression of like, I've got it all together. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's a very extreme example, but just thinking, once again on this spectrum, maybe someone isn't dealing with, extreme depression or anxiety, but they're very, very stressed out. And they're having to go into a meeting and kind of like push that all aside because they have to give this impression that they've got it all together,
How do we balance that with the reality that we do? We have to keep it all together, right? We can't just walk in and carry all our emotions on our shoulders and let it all out. However, so what I'm talking about is the taboo of expressing and balancing vulnerability with professionalism.
Totally.
How do we do that?
And I think what we're talking about right now is stigma. Because let's say I was going into a meeting and I had a broken leg, for example. And if I rolled into that meeting and said to investors that were going to be investing in my company, hey guys, I'm really sorry that I'm late. I've got this broken leg. It took me, 20 minutes extra to walk here. Nobody would say a thing about that. Nobody would question me. They wouldn't question my character. They wouldn't question my ability as an entrepreneur. Yet if I walked into that same meeting and said, hey guys, I'm sorry I'm 20 minutes late. I was very depressed this morning. I had to deal with my mental health. The perception would be night and day, right? And that's really this stigma and having more conversations like this around these topics and getting an understanding that, our mental health and our emotional health really need to be seen as the same thing, yet they're not. And it's an unfortunate thing because the person with the broken leg is struggling and the person with depression is also struggling. It's just the way that we're perceiving it is completely and drastically different.
So true. So how do we get through that stigma? I mean, especially because I think mental health is expensive for some people, or it has this perception of being expensive. So how do we push through that?
We're doing it right now. We're having open and honest conversations about it. Even for me, as somebody who's a counselor and a coach, I'm open and authentic and vulnerable about my challenges. And I know for many of my clients who don't know my story and maybe show up in a session with me and see me working with them in a confident way, when I self-disclose or they read my story on my website or on social media or something like that, it draws them in because I'm not scared to hide it anymore, and well, let me reverse. There's fear in sharing these things because it's not something that people are typically doing, yet I'm still leaning into that fear and putting it out there because I know it's serving more than just myself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, what do you think about the quote, share your scars, not your wounds?
I totally connect with that. And I believe we even talked about that on one of our calls one day. Sharing the work that somebody has done to get to that point where they're at a place of healing or they're not in distress. Definitely, I think that's the way to move forward. And certainly that's even for me, like once I've worked through it and then what can happen is you can share the resources, you can share the techniques, you can share the tips that have got you to that point of healing.
What are the dangers of sharing openly before you're healed?
And once again, it's not like a black or white thing here, because I think there is value in still sharing when somebody is in that darkest place. And at the same time, when somebody is sharing, when they're maybe in that dark, deep pit, you run the risk of potentially putting people in a place of fear and worry for you because you are in that place of you haven't worked through it. You're in the process of working through it. And at the same time, somebody that does maybe share about it when they're in that dark place, a lot of celebrities are starting to do that right now. And it's giving permission for other people to be more authentic, to be more vulnerable, and to ultimately to realize that it's okay to not be okay.
I really think that's extremely important too, because especially with social media, we just see maybe all the highlight reels of people's life. And we just think their life is always this great rainbows and unicorns, but there's so much behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for people who receive or are listening to somebody who is in distress?
It's not about trying to fix somebody. Oftentimes if somebody is coming to us, that could be a friend, it could be a family member. Oftentimes they just want an empathetic and a compassionate ear just to hear them out. So often in my work with clients, I'm not there to fix anything. I'm just there to provide a space to compassionately listen, to provide perspective, to provide reflection, and to sometimes reframe things. But yeah, it's not about trying to fix somebody, because ultimately we're not broken. And I often say that depression or anxiety isn't who I am. It's just something that I experience.
Oh, powerful. Powerful. From an entrepreneur's perspective, if somebody listening is thinking, I think I might be overstressed, I think I might be flipping out, I think I might be depressed, what are some things, maybe just in day-to-day management, what are some things that an entrepreneur can do to help heal them through mental wellness?
As hard as it is, but just taking that time to schedule in that downtime, scheduling in that time to breathe. Like I even think of, and I think you use this strategy as well, is I'll work in, hour-long blocks, but I set my timer not for 60 minutes, I'll set it for 50 minutes. And then I'll take 10 minutes to get up, to walk around, to just process, to let myself breathe. Not only is that making me more productive, but it's really allowing me to focus on my mental and emotional state and to just give some breathing room there. So oftentimes it doesn't need to be these big, grandiose actions that we take. It can be those small little efforts, over the course of time that build up that resiliency, that build up that sense of mental wellness and mental well-being. So small little things like that.
Where does sleep play into this?
Oh my goodness. Dude, we live in this hustle culture right now where it's if you're sleeping more than like 4 hours a night, you're sleeping too much. But the reality is that is a quick path to burnout. And not only that, but as we diminish the amount of sleep we get, we're building up all of these stress hormones that build up in our body. And all of these things contribute to inflammation. And there's so much research out there now that inflammation in the body leads to things like depression. We're really putting stress on our immune systems through a lack of sleep. We need that time to regenerate. So yes, maybe you're going to get a couple extra hours out of the day, but that's a very short-term solution. Long-term, you're actually doing more harm to yourself. So all of these things that are happening from like a biological standpoint, lack of sleep is not allowing us to replenish, to rejuvenate, to recharge ourselves, which is leading to more anxiety, depression, stress, burnout, all of these things.
Which leads right into the diet as well, right? Like what you eat, nutrition.
100%, man. There are all of these kind of pillars of mental health. It's not just the way we think. It's the way that we think. It's the way that we act. It's the relationships that we have. It's what we put in our body. It's like I said, and you said, the sleep. All of these different things contribute to mental health. The same way that it's not just what we eat that contributes to our physical health. It's if we're exercising. It's the relationships that we have. It's what we're consuming on social media, right? It's the weather that we live in. It's the environment that we live in. All of those things contribute to our physical health. So why would it be any different for our emotional and mental health?
Exactly. What would you have to say? You said you used the word resiliency a few minutes ago, and in my experience, people don't try to solve a problem until it's a problem. So a lot of times we don't even confront mental wellness or until we're confronted with that rock bottomness, that depression. What advice do you have for people to do every single day to build resiliency so maybe it's not as bad when the shit hits the fan, as you put it?
Well, I'm such a advocate for meditation, and I mean, that is first and foremost where someone can start. And oftentimes people say, well, I don't have an hour to meditate. Okay, great. Do you have 2 minutes? 2 minutes is better than 0.
Right.
5 minutes is better than 2 minutes. 10 minutes is better than 5. So it's just like whatever you have available on your schedule. Like, I get it. We're all overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that we have to do, but something is better than nothing. And to me, meditation is perfect for building resilience, because resilience is all about our ability to bounce back. Right? Something happens, it's our ability to bounce back. So meditation, what it does is it trains us to build that focus muscle of our mind to be able to just direct our focus wherever we need it to go, and to be able to build that up in times when we don't need it. So when we actually do need it, it's there. Right? It's the same way as like, I love going to the gym, and sure, I want to look better. I want to be stronger to lift more weight at the gym. But if I need to move the couch at my house or in my condo here, the work that I've done at the gym is going to help me do that as well. And it's the same thing with meditation. Sure, it's going to be, more mindful in sessions. You're going to feel calmer, but it's when you're out in the real world, that's when something like meditation actually comes in to be able to allow you to be more resilient in the face of challenges that as entrepreneurs we face every single day.
Right. Yeah, meditation, I have to give credit for absolutely changing my life. I've learned to prioritize peace of mind above all else. And meditation definitely helps me grab it. More importantly, now that I've done it for years, I notice when I don't do it. When I haven't meditated for a few days, I'll start getting kind of antsy and I'll start feeling anxious. And I'm like, what is going on? Oh, I haven't meditated for like 3 or 4 days in a row. So I can get right back on track with that. But here's the thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I just wanted to ask you a question is when you started meditating, did you feel like you were doing it right? Or did you feel like, oh, if my mind's not clear, I must be doing this wrong?
Yeah, and that's so funny. That's exactly what I was going to ask you, because I think meditation is now pretty mainstream, right? We hear about it all the time, but even when I talk about it, I get the same response. I don't know how to meditate. I can't stop my mind. I have a special, everybody thinks their brain is special because it's running a million miles a minute and they have too many thoughts. I went through that too. I still go through that. And what I love about meditation is I don't know that there's necessarily a right or a wrong way. I think there's some best practices to help keep you on track, but I've learned how my brain functions. So sometimes I'll keep a notebook next to my brain. Sometimes I've got an idea and it is going to pound through my brain until it gets out in the world. So I'll just write it down and I'll get right back. I'll just fall right back into it. And I usually only do 15 minutes a day. My most powerful meditation sessions come at 45 minutes, but ain't nobody got time for that sometimes, exactly. Right? So I just do the 15 minutes, or I meditate while I'm waiting somewhere. If I'm waiting a couple minutes, I'll just sit and meditate that way, make some time for it.
Yeah.
But what advice do you have for those people who maybe have tried it? They're like, okay, fine, I'll meditate. Everybody keeps talking about it. And then they sit there and they get antsy. After 30 seconds, their brain's going crazy. What advice would you have?
I mean, I want to come back to something that you said. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And a lot of people, myself included, when I first started meditating, thought that if my mind's not clear, I'm doing this incorrectly. But we have to keep in mind, that the nature of our mind is to wander, because the only job of our brain is to keep us alive. So it's constantly searching out for threats. So if we're sitting down in a meditation, for example, and all of a sudden pain is coming up in our body because we've never sat in this position before, our brain thinks, okay, pain, not good. I'm going to focus in on that. And I'm going to think about all the other times that I've had pain. And then, oh no, pain can lead to me being injured. Oh no, pain could lead to me, and then before you know it, you're down this rabbit hole. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing meditation right because my brain is wandering. Keep in mind, like I said, the nature of our mind is to wander. So whenever it wanders, gently bring it back to focus on whatever you're focusing in on. It could be your breath. It could be a mantra. It could be a visualization of some sort. It could be your body. Gently bring it back to focus. 2 seconds later, it's going to wander away again. You bring it back to focus. That's what meditation is. Because if you continuously do that over the course of days, weeks, months, years, you're going to, like I said, build up this strength of being able to bring that focus back into the present moment. So when you are out there in the real world, and like you said, when shit hits the fan, you've trained that muscle to be able to focus in on whatever's happening here in the moment. So when I'm working with my clients, they're like, oh, my mind is wandering to this. I'm thinking about the grocery list. And I'm like, okay, great. Thank your mind. Become curious and almost giggle at it. Like, thank you, mind. I appreciate you doing your job, but we're here meditating right now, and have these funny conversations with yourself.
Yeah, that was really helpful. And one of the best tips I had heard along the path is to consider your thoughts like passing clouds.
Yes.
So when you have them, like, step back and be the observer. And I love that you can tie a sense of humor into it too, and just watch the thoughts go by and just say, okay, like, don't latch onto them. You don't need a lasso to latch onto them. I can feel my heart rate and my body rev up whenever I'm attached to an idea. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff to do. I've got all this work I got to do. And that's leads me to a real practical tip too. Before I meditate, I actually write out my schedule for the day. So my brain doesn't make shit up as like of all the stuff I have to do. I know exactly what I have to do. So I know I can relax that part of my brain and get into it.
Dude, I'm gonna steal that one. I like that.
Awesome. Well, Dustin, thank you so much for diving in to mental wellness for entrepreneurs with us. I think this is an extremely important topic. It's important for us to at least acknowledge it and talk about it, and I appreciate that. Any closing words for us?
I mean, I just appreciate you having me on for one. You know that I love and respect you so much. Love everything that you're up to in the world. And this is such an important conversation to continue having. And I think the more that we can have conversations like this, the better. And, I'd say for anybody out there that's listening that maybe is struggling and is fearful of sharing this, my only piece of encouragement and my hope for you would be this: is find somebody in your life that you trust, that you are close to, and step into that vulnerability of just sharing. You don't have to share everything, but so often for me, just simply opening up, sharing, disclosing a little something has been such a important part of my healing journey, and for so many other people. It's scary. Don't get me wrong. I know it is scary. It is terrifying to open up to the world and oftentimes share these darker parts, but there's so much value in it. And it doesn't need to be in like a traditional therapy session or with a counselor or a psychologist or whatever it might be. It could be with a friend or a family member, but there's so much value in simply just opening up and sharing. So yeah.
There is a magic that happens because I think in my experience, I'm pretty sealed up when it comes to the darker emotions. What most people see is the charisma and the positive attitude and the fun and the enthusiasm about everything, right? But that stuff that happens behind the scenes, I thought we were supposed to keep it hidden. I didn't realize that when you open up and you share that other people are going through shit too. Mm-hmm. And it builds this unusual, strong, beautiful connection when two people are extremely vulnerable with each other. So I think you're absolutely right. There's something powerful that happens there. Dustin, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. And for those who are listening, if you'd like to get to know Dustin a little bit more and see what services he offers, you can get a free 15-minute consultation on coaching or counseling. Just visit his links in the VIP room at the Side Hustle Lounge. And you can get there at sidehustlelounge.com/VIP if you haven't registered yet. If you have registered, just go to sidehustlelounge.com/login and you can see Dustin's information plus all of our guests. Thank you again, Dustin. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, buddy.